There's a certain quiet steadiness you sometimes catch in a person's eyes, a calm beneath the surface that doesn't need a spotlight. It's the kind of composure you find in those who've learned that dreams don't always land in your lap, and that no amount of complaining can make life hand you a map. You might see it in someone who kept knocking on doors that refused to open, yet never allowed bitterness to settle in. Or in a person who stood firm when every critic in the room seemed poised to tear him down. That quiet resilience might not come with a parade, but it's the kind of trait that lasts when applause fades. Take Henry Cavill's journey. He lost iconic roles early on, earned a reputation for bad luck, and faced the glare of relentless expectations once fame found him. He stepped into Superman's cape under immense scrutiny, later carried the sword as Geralt of Rivia, with fans dissecting every frame. Injuries slowed him, disagreements tested him, and outside voices prodded him to be this or that. Through it all, he emerged with a composure that hints at something deeper than surface success. We're not saying he studied ancient doctrines or followed a philosophy by name. Rather, we're shining a light on moments that reflect enduring principles, ideas found in timeless wisdom that teach us to stand firm, accept what we can't control, and live honestly despite the noise. By examining these patterns, we'll uncover practical insights you can carry into your own struggles. Stick around, and maybe you'll find a way to walk steadier when life's crosswinds pick up. Welcome to Rise Stoically. Here, we sift through real-life stories and timeless teachings to find something solid beneath the shifting sands of opinion. No hollow cheerleading, no fluffy promises, just honest reflections on what it means to face difficulties without losing yourself. If you've ever wondered how to handle rejection without crumbling, or how to stand your ground when the world pushes and pulls, you're in the right place. We look at well-known figures not to glorify them, but to see what their experiences reveal. And today that figure is Henry Cavill, whose path through Hollywood offers a clear lens to observe certain enduring truths. So, settle in. The road ahead isn't always kind, but there's a wealth of strength to be found in meeting it with a calmer heart and a steadier hand. Now, pay attention to this part. We're going to break down several guiding principles, ideas that echo a mindset forged centuries ago. Each principle will be rooted in moments from Cavill's life, not to suggest he planned it that way, but to illustrate patterns that can help any of us navigate hardship. We'll see how failing at first can sharpen your edge rather than dull it, how bearing criticism without losing integrity can free you, how pain can teach patience, how authenticity trumps image, how acceptance of limits spares you from needless torment, how real craftsmanship rewards you in ways shallow shortcuts never will, how aligning with values outlasts the whims of popularity, and how embracing your unique passions grants unexpected freedoms. No fireworks, no formulas, just concepts you can tuck under your arm and carry into your own life. Principle 1. Transforming rejection into a catalyst for growth. You know, there's something peculiar about those closed doors we encounter in life. Most folks see them as endings, final verdicts on their worth, their dreams, their potential. But here's what's interesting. Sometimes those very doors that won't budge become the foundation of something far more substantial than what lay behind them. Let me tell you about Henry Cavill's dance with rejection. Back in 2005, he found himself in the running for James Bond. Now imagine that moment. Young actor, iconic role, possibility of joining a legendary franchise. The part went to Daniel Craig, but that wasn't all. Superman came knocking early too, but that door stayed shut. Twilight? Same story. The industry started whispering, calling him the unluckiest man in Hollywood. That kind of talk can sink deep into a person's bones, make them question every choice they've made. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of letting those no's define him, Cavill did something remarkable in its simplicity. He kept working. Not just showing up. Anyone can do that, but really working. Honing his craft, staying in peak physical condition, studying the industry. Each rejection became another brick in the foundation he was building, though he might not have seen it that way at the time. You see, there's a certain wisdom in this approach that echoes what those ancient thinkers used to preach. They had this notion that while you can't control the outcome, You sure as hell can control how you respond to it. Think about that for a moment. Every time a door slammed, Cavill had two paths: curl up and admit defeat, or use that energy to forge something stronger. When Zack Snyder finally called about Man of Steel, he didn't find some bitter actor nursing old wounds. He found a man who'd been unknowingly preparing for this moment through years of setbacks. Those early rejections, they'd built the kind of resilience you need to carry a franchise on your shoulders. The criticism that would come with playing Superman? Well, he'd already learned how to handle disappointment with grace. Now, I'm going to share something with you that might sound strange at first. Rejection, when you look at it right, is a lot like a blacksmith's hammer. Each blow either breaks the metal or makes it stronger. The difference isn't in the hammer, it's in the metal itself and how it's treated. Every no can temper your resolve, sharpen your skills, deepen your understanding of what you're really after. Think about your own stumbles. Maybe you didn't get that promotion you'd been eyeing. Perhaps that business venture you poured your heart into didn't take off. Could be you're sitting there right now nursing a fresh rejection that still stings. Here's what most folks don't tell you. Those moments aren't just testing you, they're teaching you. When you get knocked back, pay attention to the lessons hiding in plain sight. Did that failed interview show you gaps in your knowledge? Did that relationship that didn't work out teach you something about what you really need? Every rejection carries a seed of wisdom, if you're willing to look for it. This isn't about putting on a brave face or pretending rejection doesn't hurt. Of course it hurts, but pain can be a guide as much as a burden. It can show you where you need to grow, what you need to learn, how you need to adapt. The trick is to let it shape you without breaking you. Picture water hitting rock. Over time, that constant flow doesn't just wear the rock down, it shapes it into something new, something with depth and character. Your setbacks can do the same, but only if you stay in the game. Only if you let them polish rather than pulverize. You know what's remarkable about Cavill's story? It's not that he eventually succeeded. It's that he never let failure become his identity. Those early rejections could have been a tombstone for his dreams. Instead, they became stepping stones to something greater than he might have initially imagined. That's the thing about rejection. It's not the end of the story unless you let it be. It's just a chapter, maybe even a necessary one, because sometimes the path to where you're meant to be isn't a straight line. Sometimes it's got to twist and turn, test and teach you before you're ready for what's waiting at the end. So next time you're facing that closed door, remember this. The story isn't about the door. It's about what you do while you're standing there and where you choose to go next. That's where the real journey begins. Principle 2. Standing steady under the weight of scrutiny. Let me tell you something about pressure. It's one thing to chase a dream. That's hard enough on its own. But there's a whole different kind of challenge that comes when you actually catch it. When suddenly every move you make is under a microscope, and everyone with a keyboard or a camera has an opinion about how you're doing it wrong. Consider what happened when Henry Cavill first put on that Superman cape. Now we're talking about one of the most iconic characters in history. Generations grew up with their own vision of who Superman should be. The moment that casting news hit, the floodgates opened. Too serious, some said. Not American enough, others argued. Doesn't capture the classic charm, a few insisted. Before he'd even delivered a single line on screen, the world was already passing judgment. Then came Man of Steel. The scrutiny intensified. Every facial expression, every line delivery, every subtle choice was dissected. Comic book fans had their take. Critics had theirs. Social media, well, that was a whole other storm. The pressure would have crushed a lesser spirit. But here's what's worth noting. Through it all, Cavill maintained his composure. No public meltdowns, no bitter Twitter rants, no desperate attempts to please every voice in the crowd. You might say, well, that's just part of being a movie star. But let's dig deeper. When he took on Geralt in The Witcher, he stepped into another beloved character. The fans of those books and games, they're as passionate as they come. They noticed everything. The way he moved, how he delivered Geralt's signature grunts, whether he captured that character's world-weary essence. The pressure didn't let up, it just shifted shape. Here's where it gets interesting. When creative differences arose in The Witcher, Cavill faced a choice that many of us recognize in our own lives. Stick to your guns and risk disappointing people, or compromise what you believe to be right just to keep the peace. He chose to step away. That's the kind of decision that takes real backbone, choosing integrity over comfort, substance over surface approval. Now, I want you to think about pressure in your own life. Maybe it's not millions of fans scrutinizing your every move. Maybe it's a workplace where everyone's got an opinion about how you should do your job. Could be family members second-guessing your life choices, or perhaps it's social media, where it seems like everyone's an expert on how you're living wrong. The ancient philosophers had something profound to say about this. They understood that you can't control what others think or say. That's their business. What you can control is how you carry yourself through the storm. It's about building an inner fortress that external opinions can't breach. Let me share something with you about strength. Real strength isn't about being unmovable like a mountain. It's about being like a well-rooted tree that can bend with strong winds without breaking. You listen to feedback that helps you grow, but you don't let every passing breeze knock you off course. Think about criticism as weather. Some days bring gentle rain that helps you grow. Other days bring storms that test your roots. The trick isn't to avoid the weather. It's to build yourself strong enough to weather it all. That means knowing your own mind, trusting your judgment, and understanding that not every opinion needs to become your concern. You know what's remarkable? When you watch interviews with Cavill discussing Superman or Geralt, there's a steadiness there. He doesn't dismiss fan passion, he respects it. But he also doesn't let it dictate his every move. He found that sweet spot between being receptive to valid feedback and maintaining his own center of gravity. This balance is something we all could use, whether we're in the public eye or not. It's about building the kind of inner strength that doesn't need to announce itself, the kind that lets you listen to others without losing yourself, the kind that helps you stand your ground without having to plant your feet and scream about it. Here's the truth about handling pressure. The goal isn't to become bulletproof. It's to develop the wisdom to know which opinions matter, the strength to stand by your convictions, and the grace to do it all without creating unnecessary conflict. It's about finding that quiet confidence that lets you say, "I hear you, but this is where I stand." Remember this, the loudest voice in any room isn't necessarily the wisest. Sometimes the real strength lies in staying steady while the noise swirls around you, in knowing your own mind while others shout about what you should think. That's not just survival, that's mastery. Principle 3. Finding strength through physical adversity. Let me tell you about something we don't talk about enough, the way our bodies can turn from ally to adversary in the blink of an eye. One day you're moving through life like a well-oiled machine, and the next something snaps, tears, or just plain gives out. That's when you learn what you're really made of. Take what happened during the filming of The Witcher. Henry Cavill suffered a serious hamstring tear, the kind of injury that can sideline an athlete for months. Now, imagine that pressure. You're the lead in a major series, carrying fight scenes, stunts, and the weight of a franchise on your shoulders. Production schedules don't care much for healing time. Money's on the line. Hundreds of people are waiting. But a torn hamstring, that's not something you can just walk off or power through. Here's where it gets interesting. Instead of trying to rush back and risk worse damage, Cavill had to embrace a slower path. Rehabilitation isn't glamorous. It's hours of careful, methodical work. Small movements, gradual progress. The kind of patience that goes against every instinct when you're used to pushing your limits. You know what most folks don't understand about physical setbacks? They're not just about the body. They get into your head. They make you question your capabilities, your future, your identity. When you've built a career on being physically capable, whether you're an actor doing stunts or someone who works construction, being sidelined feels like more than just an injury. It feels like a piece of yourself has been temporarily misplaced. But here's the wisdom hidden in those moments. When your body forces you to slow down, you start noticing things. Maybe you develop a deeper appreciation for the movements you took for granted. Perhaps you discover mental strength you didn't know you had. That's what those ancient thinkers understood. Sometimes our greatest growth happens when we're forced to step back. Think about your own body for a moment. Maybe you've felt that betrayal. A back that suddenly seizes up, a knee that starts to protest every flight of stairs, or just the slow creep of age making things harder than they used to be. These aren't just inconveniences, they're invitations to develop a different kind of strength. I'll share something with you about pain. Pain isn't just a warning signal, it's a teacher. But you've got to be willing to listen to what it's saying. Sometimes it's telling you to stop, other times to change course. Trick is learning the difference between the pain you need to respect and the discomfort you need to push through. During his recovery, Cavill couldn't film the intense fight scenes The Witcher was known for, at least not right away. The production had to adapt, just like he did. That's another lesson right there. Sometimes the path forward isn't about forcing your way through a wall, it's about finding a different route around it. You see, there's a certain kind of wisdom that only comes through physical adversity. It teaches you humility, the understanding that no matter how strong or capable you are, your body has limits that demand respect. It teaches you patience, the kind that can't be rushed or argued with. And maybe most importantly, it teaches you adaptability, the art of finding new ways to move forward when the old ways aren't available. Here's something worth remembering about healing. It's not a straight line. Some days you feel stronger, others you seem to slide backward. The body has its own timeline, and it doesn't much care about your schedule or your goals. Learning to accept this, truly accept it, not just grudgingly tolerate it, that's where real strength begins to build. I've noticed something about people who handle physical setbacks well. They don't waste energy fighting against reality. Instead, they invest that energy in working with what they have. They find ways to maintain their spirit while their body mends. They build mental toughness when physical toughness isn't an option. Consider how Cavill approached his return to filming. It wasn't about rushing back to prove something. It was about coming back right, stronger, wiser, more aware of his body's signals. That's the kind of patience that turns a setback into a setup for something better. And here's the real truth about physical adversity. It's not about getting back to exactly who you were before. It's about becoming someone new, someone who understands their limits but isn't defined by them. Someone who's learned that strength isn't just about power or speed. Sometimes it's about the wisdom to slow down, the courage to be patient, and the fortitude to trust the healing process. Remember this, your body's setbacks don't have to be your spirit's defeat. They can be the foundation for a different kind of strength, the kind that carries you through not just physical challenges, but every other obstacle life throws your way. Principle 4. Living true in a world of masks. Let me tell you something about masks. Not the kind you wear to fancy parties, but the ones people put on every day. Those careful disguises we wear to fit what others expect of us. You see them everywhere, in offices, at social gatherings, even in our own homes. Folks hiding their true interests, dampening their enthusiasm, trying to squeeze themselves into boxes that were never built to hold them. Now picture this, a Hollywood leading man, someone who's played Superman and Geralt of Rivia, sitting down in front of cameras to talk about building his own gaming PC, not hiring someone to do it, actually getting his hands dirty with thermal paste and cable management. That's Henry Cavill for you. When most actors might talk about yacht parties or exclusive clubs, he's excitedly discussing Warhammer miniatures and painting techniques. Here's where it gets interesting. In an industry that often expects its stars to maintain a certain image, sophisticated, perhaps a little aloof, Cavill chose a different path. He didn't just mention his interest in passing, he embraced them fully. There's a video out there of him correcting an interviewer about Warhammer, not dismissively, but with the kind of genuine enthusiasm you can't fake. That's the thing about real passion. It has a way of shining through any attempt to dim it. You know what's remarkable about this? It's not just that he has these interests, plenty of folks do. It's that he owns them completely and unapologetically. When he talks about the Witcher games or his love for World of Warcraft, it's not with that nervous laugh people often use when discussing their guilty pleasures. There's no guilt in his pleasures, just pure, unvarnished enjoyment. Let me share something with you about authenticity. It's like a river. You can dam it up for a while, direct it into neat little channels, try to make it behave. But eventually, that water's going to find its natural course. The same goes for who you really are. You can spend years trying to be what others want, but that genuine self of yours, it's going to keep pushing to break free. Think about your own life for a moment. Maybe you love something that doesn't fit your image. Could be you're a tough construction worker who writes poetry in your lunch break. Maybe you're a corporate executive who loves collecting comic books. Or perhaps you're that quiet accountant who comes alive behind a drum kit on weekends. Here's the truth about these passions we hide. They're not just hobbies or interests, they're pieces of our soul trying to speak. When we silence them, we're not just giving up activities we enjoy, we're cutting off parts of ourselves, dimming our own light bit by bit. Consider this. Every time Cavill speaks about his gaming PC or his painted miniatures, he's doing something more significant than just sharing a hobby. He's showing that success doesn't require you to file down your edges until you fit in some pre-approved mold. That you can reach the heights of your profession while still being unabashedly yourself. You might be thinking, well, that's easy for him. He's already successful. But flip that around. Maybe he's successful partly because of that authenticity. In a world full of carefully curated images, genuine passion stands out. It has a gravity to it, draws people in. When you're real about who you are, you give others permission to be real too. I've noticed something about people who live authentically. They tend to have a certain ease about them, a comfort in their own skin that no amount of status or success can buy. They might not fit in everywhere, but they fit perfectly with themselves. That's worth more than 1,000 polite nods from people who only like the mask you're wearing. Here's something worth remembering about true interests. They have a way of finding each other. When Cavill talks about his hobbies, he connects with millions who share those passions. Not because he's Superman, but because they recognize that genuine enthusiasm. They see someone who loves what they love, without filters or pretense. The ancient thinkers had a word for this kind of alignment, when your outer life matches your inner truth. They saw it as a key to tranquility, not because it makes life easier, sometimes it makes things harder, but because it frees up all that energy you were using to maintain a facade. Let me tell you about freedom. Real freedom isn't about doing whatever you want, it's about being whoever you are, about letting your genuine interests and passions breathe in the open air, even if they don't match what others think you should be. That's the kind of freedom no one can give you. You have to claim it for yourself. Remember this. The world doesn't need another perfect imitation of what's expected. It needs your unique version of what's real. Your quirks, your passions, your unusual combinations of interests. That's not just who you are. It's your gift to a world drowning in uniformity. Principle 5. The art of accepting what we cannot change. You know something about rivers? They don't fight the landscape, they flow around it. When they hit a boulder, they don't stop and rage at the stone. They find another path, and there's a kind of wisdom in that, something deeper than just water finding its way. It's a lesson about knowing when to let go. Let me tell you about a moment that caught a lot of folks by surprise. When Henry Cavill announced he was leaving The Witcher, a role he'd poured himself into, a character he clearly loved, it stirred up quite a storm. Fans were shocked. Rumors started flying. Here was a man who'd talked passionately about the source material, who'd pushed himself to embody Geralt in every detail, and now he was walking away. Here's where it gets interesting. Instead of getting caught up in a public battle of words, instead of trying to control the narrative or fight against what couldn't be changed, he chose a different path. He acknowledged the situation and moved forward. No bitter interviews, no social media wars, just a clear understanding that sometimes best thing you can do is accept what is and redirect your energy toward what's next. Think about that for a moment. How many times have we all clung to something that was already slipping away? Could be a job that's no longer a fit, a relationship that's run its course, or a dream that needs to be reshaped. We spend so much energy fighting against reality, trying to force things to be what they used to be or what we wish they were. Let me share something about control. Most folks think they've got a lot more of it than they really do. We make our plans, set our course, think we can steer everything just the way we want it. But life has its own ideas. Just ask anyone who's ever had their perfect plans derailed by circumstances they never saw coming. This isn't just about Hollywood careers or high-profile decisions. Maybe you've been passed over for a promotion you thought was yours. Perhaps your small business hit headwinds you couldn't have predicted. Could be as simple as a project you loved taking a direction you didn't agree with. That moment when you realize something's beyond your control, that's where this principle really shows its worth. Here's the thing about acceptance that most people get wrong. They think it means giving up, throwing in the towel, letting life walk all over you. But real acceptance, that's something else entirely. It's about having the wisdom to know which battles are worth fighting and which ones are just going to drain you dry. Take Cavill's earlier departure from Superman. When plans for the character went in a different direction, he could have launched a campaign to change minds, could have rallied fans, made demands, burned bridges. Instead, he handled it with grace, accepted what he couldn't change, and kept his dignity intact. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength that comes from knowing when to let go. You see, there's something liberating about accepting what you can't control. It's like putting down a heavy load you've been carrying uphill. Suddenly you've got energy for other things. Your mind clears. You can see opportunities you missed while you were too busy fighting unwinnable battles. Let me tell you about peace of mind. It doesn't come from controlling everything around you. That's impossible anyway. It comes from understanding what's yours to shape and what isn't. Those ancient philosophers, they were onto something when they talked about this. They knew that true power isn't in trying to bend the whole world to your will. It's in mastering your response to whatever the world throws your way. Consider how much energy we waste, arguing with reality, trying to force situations that have run their course, refusing to accept when a chapter's ended. All that energy could be going towards something new, something that aligns better with where we are now, not where we wish we were. Here's a truth worth holding on to. Every time you accept what you can't change, you free up strength for the things you can. Every time you stop fighting the unmovable, you find clearer paths around it. It's not about giving up your power. It's about using it more wisely. Remember this. The world's going to keep turning. Plans are going to keep changing, and some doors are going to stay closed no matter how hard you knock. Your choice isn't about whether these things happen. Your choice is about how you meet them when they do. Do you waste your strength pushing against what can't be moved? Or do you take that same strength and build something new with it? In the end, it's like that river we talked about. The water doesn't stop flowing just because it meets a mountain. It doesn't give up its journey. It just finds a different way to reach where it's going. And sometimes that new path leads to places even better than what was originally planned. Principle 6. The power of patient craftsmanship. Let me tell you something about craftsmanship. In a world obsessed with shortcuts and quick fixes, there's still something special about watching someone who takes their time, who puts in the hours not because someone's watching, but because that's just how they're built. It's getting harder to find, but when you see it, really see it, it stops you in your tracks. Consider this. When Henry Cavill took on Superman, he didn't just slip on a cape and call it good. He transformed himself physically, yes, but that was just the surface. He dug into decades of comic history, understanding what made the character tick. For The Witcher, he didn't just learn his lines and swing a sword around. He studied the books, played the games, mastered the movements until Geralt's way of being lived in his bones. Here's where it gets interesting. During filming of The Witcher, Cavill insisted on doing as many of his own stunts as possible. Not for the glory. There's no glory in countless rehearsals and the aches that follow. He did it because that's what the craft demanded. Each sword movement, each grunt, each subtle expression, they all had to feel real, lived in, earned. You know what most folks don't see? They don't see the early mornings in the gym, the hours spent practicing fight choreography, the time invested in understanding every nuance of a character. They just see the final product. But that's the thing about real craftsmanship. It's not about the applause, it's about the quiet satisfaction of knowing you did something right. Let me share something about excellence. It's not born in grand moments or sudden breakthroughs. It's built in those small decisions you make when nobody's looking. The choice to do one more take, to refine one more detail, to keep pushing when good enough, would probably satisfy most people. Think about your own work. Maybe you're not fighting monsters on camera or wearing a superhero's cape. Maybe you're fixing engines, teaching kids, cooking meals, or crunching numbers. The craft itself doesn't matter. What matters is how you approach it. Are you just putting in time, or are you building something that'll last? Here's a truth about mastery that often gets overlooked. It's not about being perfect. It's about being better today than you were yesterday. When Cavill builds his gaming PCs or paints his Warhammer figures, he's applying that same principle. Each piece teaches something. Each attempt adds to the knowledge base. That's how craft becomes second nature. You see, there's something almost sacred about doing things the right way. Not the easy way, not the quick way, but the right way. Those old Stoic philosophers understood this. They knew that the reward for good work isn't just in the result. It's in who you become while doing it. Every time you choose quality over convenience, every time you push past that'll do to reach that's right, you're not just building a product, you're building character. Let me tell you about time. We're all in such a hurry these days. Everything's instant, everything's rushed, but real craft, that takes patience. Watch a master carpenter work with wood, or a skilled chef develop a sauce, or yes, an actor fully inhabiting a character. They're not watching the clock, they're watching the work, letting it tell them what it needs. Consider how Cavill approaches his roles. Basically for The Witcher, he didn't just learn the lines. He learned a different way of moving, of speaking, of being. That kind of dedication seeps into everything. Even in interviews, you can see him light up when talking about the details. The small things that most would overlook, but that make all the difference. Here's something worth remembering about the long road to mastery. Every expert started as a beginner. Every master craftsman once made rookie mistakes. The difference isn't in natural talent, though that helps. The difference is in the willingness to keep showing up, to keep learning, to keep refining long after others would have called it done. I've noticed something about people who take pride in their craft. They have a certain peace about them. They don't need constant validation or praise. They know when something's done right, and that knowledge carries them through the tough times. It's like they're playing a longer game, building something that'll outlast the trending topics and viral moments. Think about legacy. Not the kind that makes headlines, but the quiet kind. The kind that lives in the things you create, the standards you uphold, the example you set. Every time you choose craft over convenience, every time you put in the extra effort just because it's the right thing to do, you're adding to that legacy. Remember this. In a world that's always looking for the easy way out, there's something revolutionary about choosing the path of craftsmanship. It's not just about what you make, it's about making something of yourself in the process. Principle 7. Values over image. The courage of conviction. Let me tell you about something that's getting rarer these days. It's that old-fashioned notion of standing by your principles, even when it costs you something. In a world where everyone's so concerned about their personal brand and keeping up appearances, there's something powerful about someone who says, "This is where I draw the line." You know what got me thinking about this? When Henry Cavill stepped away from The Witcher, a show that had brought him global acclaim, a fat paycheck, and millions of dedicated fans. Now, he didn't make a big show of it or throw anyone under the bus. But if you look at his history with the character, you see someone who deeply respected the source material. He'd read the books, played the games, and fought to keep Geralt true to what made fans fall in love with him in the first place. Here's where it gets interesting. When the creative direction started shifting away from what he believed in, he had a choice to make. He could have stayed on, collected the checks, kept his head down. Plenty would have called that the smart play. Instead, he chose to step away. That's not just walking away from a paycheck. That's walking away from a role he loved because something more important was at stake. Think about what that means. In an industry where your next job often depends on not rocking the boat, where being difficult can kill a career faster than bad reviews, he chose his principles over playing it safe. That's not about being stubborn or self-righteous. It's about having a clear sense of what you stand for. Let me share something about integrity. It's not just about big dramatic moments or grand stands. Sometimes it's in those quiet decisions. The ones where you could easily compromise, where nobody would probably even notice if you did, but you choose to stand firm anyway. That's where your character really shows itself. Consider your own crossroads. Maybe it's that moment when your boss asks you to fudge some numbers just a little, or when staying quiet about something wrong would make your life easier. Could be as simple as having to choose between popularity and honesty. These moments don't come with warning bells. They slip in quiet, asking you to trade a little piece of your soul for a bit of comfort. You see, there's something most folks don't understand about values. They're not like a fancy suit you put on for special occasions. They're more like your spine. They're supposed to hold you up, keep you straight, help you stand tall when things get heavy. The moment you start bending them for convenience, you're already falling. Take Cavill's approach to his craft. When he takes on a role, he dives deep into the character's world. For Superman, for Geralt, he studied the source material like a scholar. That's not just professional dedication. That's respect for the stories and the fans who love them. When that respect was compromised, he chose integrity over continuity. Here's the thing about standing by your values. It's not always going to make you popular, might not even look like the smart move at first. But there's a kind of peace that comes with knowing you stayed true to what you believe. It's like building a house on solid rock instead of shifting sand. Storms might come, but you know where you stand. I've noticed something about people who live by their principles. They tend to sleep better at night, not because their lives are easier, often they're harder, but because they're not carrying the weight of compromise, not haunted by the ghost of what if I'd stood my ground. Let me tell you about respect. The real kind, not the superficial nods people give to power or success. It's earned in those moments when standing by your values costs you something, when you choose the harder right over the easier wrong. That's the kind of respect that lasts, that builds a legacy worth having. Think about the long game. Every time you compromise your values for temporary gain, you're trading something permanent for something fleeting. Every time you stand firm, even when it hurts, you're building something that lasts. Your principles aren't just ideas. They're the foundation you build your life upon. Remember this. In a world where image often trumps substance, where going along to get along is considered wisdom, there's something almost revolutionary about simply standing by what you believe in. Not with fanfare or drama, but with that quiet certainty that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. Principle 8. The freedom of embracing your true passions. Let me tell you something about freedom. Real freedom. Not the kind you see in commercials or read about in magazines. I'm talking about the freedom that comes when you finally stop dancing to other people's tunes and start living your own truth. The kind that shows up when you look at what you love, really love, and decide it doesn't matter if anyone else understands it. Here's a picture worth considering. One of Hollywood's leading men, someone who's played Superman and led major franchises, sitting down to paint tiny Warhammer figurines. Not as a publicity stunt, mind you. Henry Cavill does this because it brings him joy. When he talks about building his own gaming PC or diving deep into fantasy worlds, there's no shame in his voice, no apologetic laugh. Just pure, unfiltered enthusiasm. You know what's remarkable about that? In a world where image is everything, where celebrities often curate every aspect of their public persona, here's someone who simply says, "This is what I love. Take it or leave it." He'll correct interviewers who mix up Warhammer Fantasy with 40K. He'll geek out about Total War games. He'll discuss PC building with the kind of detail that would make most PR handlers nervous. Here's where it gets interesting. Every time he shares these passions openly, something magical happens. People who share these interests feel a little more seen, a little more validated. Suddenly, it's not just nerdy hobbies anymore. It's something even Superman enjoys. That's the power of authentic passion. It doesn't just free you, it gives others permission to be free too. Let me share something about joy. The real kind. Not the polite smile you wear at social functions, but that deep down excitement that bubbles up when you're doing something you truly love. Maybe it's collecting stamps, or building model trains, or knowing everything there is to know about Renaissance art. The specific passion doesn't matter. What matters is that it's truly yours. Think about the things you keep hidden, those interests you don't bring up at work, the hobbies you downplay at family gatherings, the passions you keep tucked away because they don't fit someone else's idea of who you should be. What if you just let them out? not with fanfare or defiance, but with that same easy confidence of someone who knows who they are. You see, there's something powerful about refusing to be embarrassed by what brings you joy. Watch Cavill in interviews when he starts talking about gaming or Warhammer. There's no trace of that awkward self-consciousness people often have when discussing their unusual interests. He owns it, completely and naturally. That ownership disarms judgment before it can even take root. Here's a truth about authenticity that often gets overlooked. When you embrace your genuine interests, you attract your genuine tribe. Those who share your passions will find you, and those who don't, well, they weren't your audience anyway. Better to have a few real connections based on authentic interests than 1,000 shallow ones built on pretense. Let me tell you about strength. There's a special kind of strength in being unapologetically yourself in a world that's always trying to make you something else. It's not about being defiant or confrontational. It's about being so comfortable in your own skin that other people's judgments just don't have anywhere to stick. Consider what happens when someone fully embraces their passions. Their eyes light up when they talk about them. Their energy shifts. They become more alive, more present, more real. That's not something you can fake. And here's the thing. That kind of genuine enthusiasm is contagious. It makes others want to be around you, not despite your quirks, but because of them. I've noticed something about people who live this way. They tend to be more resilient, more grounded. Because when you're anchored in what truly matters to you, the world's attempts to shake you don't hit quite as hard. Your joy isn't dependent on others' approval. Your worth isn't tied to fitting in. Here's something worth remembering about passion. It's not just about having hobbies or interests. It's about allowing yourself to be fully alive in what you love. When Cavill builds a gaming PC on camera, he's not just showing off a hobby. He's demonstrating what it looks like to live without the mask of expectations. Think about liberation. Not the noisy kind that demands attention, but the quiet kind that comes from finally putting down the weight of other people's expectations. Every time you freely share what you love, every time you choose authenticity over acceptance, you're not just expressing yourself. You're breaking ground for others to do the same. Remember this. In a world that's always trying to file down your edges to make you fit, your quirks and passions aren't flaws to be hidden. They're gifts to be shared. They're the very things that make you uniquely you. And that's not just okay. It's exactly as it should be. You know, there's something interesting about life's lessons. They don't come at you in neat little packages, all separated and labeled. No, they weave together like threads in an old tapestry. Each one distinct, but part of a larger picture that only makes sense when you step back and really look at it. Take this journey we've been on. It started with rejection, those closed doors that either break you or forge you into something stronger. But here's the thing about getting knocked down. It prepares you for the critics who'll come later, when you finally get where you're going. That's why those first two lessons, handling rejection and standing steady under criticism, they're like two sides of the same coin. Now, when we talked about physical setbacks, those moments when your body reminds you it's got limits, that wasn't just about healing, it was about understanding something deeper. See, that same patience, that same careful attention you need when recovering from injury, that's exactly what you need to master any craft. The pain teaches you persistence, and persistence builds excellence. Here's where it gets interesting. While you're building that strength, both inner and outer, something else starts happening. You begin to understand who you really are. That's where authenticity comes in. Not just wearing your truth on your sleeve, but living it in every choice you make. And once you start being real with yourself, those passions you might have hidden, they start demanding to be heard. But life's got a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? That's when you need to know the difference between what you can change and what you can't. Acceptance isn't about giving up. It's about being wise enough to know where to put your energy. And that wisdom? It leads you straight to understanding what values are worth standing firm on, no matter which way the wind blows. Think about it like building a house. Handling rejection and criticism? That's your foundation. Physical resilience and craftsmanship? Those are your walls and support beams. Authenticity and accepting what you can't change. That's your roof and shelter, your values and passions. Well, those are what turn that house into a home. Each principle we've explored supports the others. When you stay true to your values, it makes it easier to be authentic. When you accept what you can't control, it helps you handle rejection better. When you embrace your real passions, it gives you strength to face critics. They're all connected, all working together to build something stronger than any single lesson could create on its own. That's the beauty of wisdom. It's not about memorizing rules or following a strict path. It's about understanding how these truths work together, how they support and strengthen each other. Like notes in a song, each one has its place, but it's how they come together that creates the melody. You know, as we come to the end of this trail we've been walking together, it's worth taking a moment to look back at the ground we've covered. We've explored these principles not just through the lens of a successful actor's journey, but through the deeper truths that speak to all of us, no matter where we stand in life. Think about it. We started with rejection, those closed doors that shaped Henry Cavill's early career. But it wasn't really about him, was it? It was about that universal experience of picking yourself up when the world says no, about finding strength in the stumble, wisdom in the wait, and determination in the delay. Then we walked through the gauntlet of criticism, something that gets sharper and louder the higher you climb. We saw how maintaining your center in the storm isn't just about endurance. It's about knowing who you are and standing firm in that knowledge. Whether you're facing millions of opinions or just a few voices that cut close to home, that lesson holds true. Remember what we learned about physical setbacks? That wasn't just about hamstring tears or studio delays. It was about how we handle the limitations our bodies throw at us, how we find patience when pushing through isn't an option. Some of you might be nodding right now, thinking about your own battles with injury or illness, understanding that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is heal slowly, purposefully. We talked about craftsmanship, that dedication to doing things right, not just doing them fast. Whether you're building gaming PCs like Cavill, or crafting furniture, or teaching young minds, or healing sick patients, that principle of putting your whole self into your work, that's something that transcends any single profession. And authenticity, that might be the thread that ties it all together. Being real about who you are, what you love, what you believe in. We saw it in how Cavill embraces his passions openly, but it's a lesson that applies to each of us. Because at the end of the day, the energy we spend pretending to be something we're not is energy we can't invest in becoming who we're meant to be. Here's something worth carrying with you. These principles we've explored, they're not rules carved in stone. They're more like landmarks on a map, helping you find your way when the path gets rough. Some days you'll nail every single one of them. Other days you might struggle with just getting one right. That's not failure, that's being human. The real power isn't in perfect practice, it's in persistent pursuit. It's in getting up one more time than you fall. It's in staying true to your values even when it costs you something. It's in accepting what you can't change, while working hard to change what you can. It's in loving what you love without apology. You might be wondering how to start putting all this into practice. Well, let me tell you something. You don't have to revolutionize your life overnight. Start small. Maybe today it's about facing one rejection with grace. Tomorrow it might be about standing firm on one principle that matters to you. The day after, perhaps it's about showing one genuine passion you've kept hidden. Remember this: every person we admire, every story that inspires us, started with simple choices made day after day. Cavill's journey from rejected actor to beloved figure wasn't about grand gestures. It was about steady persistence, unwavering authenticity, and the courage to stay true to himself. As you head back into your own story, take these principles not as a burden to bear, but as tools to help you build something meaningful. Use them to craft your own path, to face your own challenges, to write your own tale of persistence and authenticity, and know this: the strength to walk that path. It's already in you. Sometimes it just needs a little reminder to show itself. So go on. Take that next step. Face that next challenge. Live that next chapter. The road ahead might not be easy, but now you've got a few more tools to help you walk it with grace. Until next time, remember, true strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise, how you learn, and how you keep moving forward one step at a time. If these principles resonated with you, There's a whole community of like-minded souls waiting to share their own journeys of resilience and growth. Hit that subscribe button below to join us at Rise Stoically, where we explore timeless wisdom through modern stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. What principle spoke to you the most? How do you plan to apply it in your life? And if you know someone who could use these insights right now, someone who's facing their own battles or searching for their path, share this video with them. Sometimes the right message at the right time can make all the difference. This is Rise Stoically, reminding you that true strength grows in quiet moments, and every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory worth celebrating.